Hello, friends. So for this assessment, I wanted to talk about storms and what they kind of mean and what assessment you might give to look for it to see how the person interprets the stress in their life. If you want to see my Don Jones guided imagery, I have that posted. So when I had the question of the river, you have to cross a river. You can look at the river and how big it is to see how manageable this sort of stress is to the person. And so you have that same concept too with a well-established assessment called Draw a Person in the Rain. And it's quite simple. It's best to give the directive no stick figures. Whatever they want to do, it's not a stick figure. We're not judging their artwork, but they're in the rain. And when you look at how heavy the storm is, how much energy they put into actually creating the storm, if there's lightning, those can all tell you how they view the stress in their life and their capability to handle it. Someone who isn't too stressed at the moment, it might just be like a little bit of rain. But someone who's really going through it, it may be a tornado or hurricane or something along those lines. I'm sorry if you hear any sounds. The person in the room above me, I think, is playing jacks, and I keep throwing down the jacks and the marbles. But anyway, so sorry about that, if that's a distraction. But an important thing to look at when you're doing Draw a Person in the Rain is coping skills. Does the individual they drew have anything to protect themselves from the rain? Do they have an umbrella? Are they wearing a hat? Do they have rain boots on or a good jacket? Or are they simply in the rain getting wet? So you could Draw a Person in the Rain. A lot of people, especially children, like being in the rain. And so that might not give you a very good assessment of how they're dealing with stress because they may just be dancing and jumping around in the puddles. And so giving a storm as your directive may help better. I've seen people do storms that are not rainstorms as well. I've seen people in deserts or people just on a park bench because to them the storm is more of an internal one when people internalize a lot of things. And that's a really classic one to look at, and you can definitely ask some follow-up questions to help you understand a bit more. You can ask them to write a story on the back, like a 4-sentence story. You can ask them directly if this kind of metaphorically relates to their life and how they handle stress. Or you can ask them questions about the person there, such as, how did they get into the rain? Where are they coming from? And where are they going? You can also ask, especially with children, who takes care of them? Do they take care of themselves? Kind of thing. And if they give anything interesting that you want to ask another follow-up question on, that's absolutely, you can do that as well. Another assessment, I'm not sure if you want to call it because it's not well established, is the boat storm Lighthouse. And this is a much more recent occurrence, but it looks at similar things. So how big the storm is, again, tells you about their stress and how big the obstacle is. And your boat and how big it is to deal with it, or whether it has the sails out, or if it's going topside, if the person's trapped in the bottom. It can, again, tell you about coping skills. You may have a person in the boat. You may have a family in the boat. It can definitely be something that you assess the family dynamics with, see who's steering it, who's running around making things worse. Do they have life vests on? What's going on here in this boat? And then the lighthouse kind of looks at hope. How bright is it? How distant is it? Is it even lit? Is there a cloud covering it? Now, if they don't light it, this is a story I've heard passed down, don't light it for them. This was a nurse who one time was helping with the group, and she got very frustrated with a man who I believe he was a veteran from the Vietnam War, and I believe his wife passed away, and he was very depressed, and he couldn't light it. He didn't have it in him emotionally to give. The nurse came over, took some paint, and just put the light right into the lighthouse. And it was very upsetting when someone interacts with your art like that. So talk about them, give them the time and the space that they need, and see how it goes. There's no right or wrong answers here. You can have them try and draw it again later when you want to reassess how they're doing. But all these colors can also be an important indicator. If they choose, it's best to have different materials out so they can choose from it. Colored pencils, regular pencils, markers, and the paper. When you put it down, some people look into the way that it's positioned, with this being a little bit more aggressive, this being a bit more typical. So you don't want to tell them which way to make it. So I was taught to always place it in front of them like this. So it's ambiguous, the corner points at them, and when they go to straighten it out, they can either straighten it this way or they can straighten it this way. If they pick pencils, when we're looking at the MDV and the ETC, we can see that it is not too far on the effective. You know, it's very controlled. Pencils are controlling. It's only one color. Colors, we know, are connected to the affect, and the more colors you use, the more in touch with emotions that things tend to be. Especially if you look at a lot of green. If there's a lot of green, that's healthy, that's grounding, those are good coping skills. If there's lacking green, then you may have some things to look into more. So the markers are the most expressive, the most loose, the most affectively inclined, and pencils are the most constricted, with the colored pencils being right in between. So that's always good to look at. You do have issues sometimes when you have someone who sees themselves as an artist, because they might not be tapping into and drawing what is most connected to them, but what they know how to draw and what they want to the final product to look like. And it may go more into aesthetic choices. They may feel more comfortable and controlled because they have experience with a pencil, whereas they may have a negative association with markers as being like a childhood thing, and they don't consider themselves a child, even though they may be more in touch with their affective. And maybe their second choice, they like black and white. So you can just keep all that in mind when you're working with it. You can also look at how much energy do they put into it. Is it grounded? Is there a ground in any of these? Is it an implied ground? Is it floating around in the top completely ungrounded? Do they put any effort into the background? You can also ask them to title it, because art naturally taps into the right side of the brain with images, and then a title, being words, taps into the left side of the brain. So you can interconnect some of those two parts of the brain and the other sort of memories that come with it when you now have to figure out what it is to give it a title. So those are all great things that you can do. Ask any follow-up questions that you want, and take some time to sit with it after they made it and kind of look at and think about what you're looking at. That's all for this one. See you next time. Bye.